Here we go. So we've been exploring taking refuge, and last week we were talking about the life of the Buddha. So I'd like to pick up with that. And the question that we began with today focused a little bit on that. And the basic idea that I'm exploring from this side is, the life of this person who lived 500 years before the Common Era, 500 years BC. What does that mean for you and I? Because Buddhism is not a religion that puts its founder up on the pedestal of divinity. The Buddha is not a god. And we're not just following things because he did them. If he had a pastrami sandwich, we don't become the pastrami sandwich religion. So it's sort of like, what does that mean for us? And to take refuge in the Buddha, how do I find confidence and a good, safe place to understand my own spiritual journey in that life example? Like, how is his life like my life? So last week we looked at, what was the change moment for the Buddha. And it's often told as the story of his encounter. He leaves the palace, his life of luxury and privilege is interrupted suddenly and unexpectedly by encountering an old person, a sick person, a corpse, and then a wandering meditator. And it penetrates his veil of privilege and comfort and starts him down the pathway of there must be more to life than this privilege and comfort I have as the prince in the palace. And so he sets off on a journey of exploration. And the question I asked at the beginning of today, which had to do with what's a mistake that you made at the beginning of your journey of exploration, is connected to that what happens for the Buddha during the next 6 years is a story of happy mistakes. That he makes a mistake and he explores it, and then he makes another mistake. And each mistake or each understanding that doesn't accomplish what he wants to do takes him a little further. And so when we were discussing the question, I talked about being in our culture of today, or 2023 culture of like, you can't make any mistakes. You're supposed to get it right instantly. It's supposed to be easy and, get it right 100% right from the very beginning. That's not generally how the spiritual path works. So you have this moment of insight that starts you on the path, and then you have some period of exploration. And often what happens in the pattern is you have a moment of insight and an exploration, and then that leads you to another insight, and that sends you on another exploration, and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. Of course, you can get busy chasing the insight and miss the journey. And that's not a good thing. Trungpa Rinpoche said, the journey is the goal, right? The path is the goal. Getting yourself on the path is really useful. And then letting yourself be on the path, letting yourself explore and grow and change and so forth. So in the story of the Buddha, he was inspired by the example of the wandering meditator, the wandering ascetic. And so he goes to find a teacher. Useful to know he needed a teacher. He didn't just make it up on his own. Sometimes when the story is told, it's as if he already knew everything and he just had to pretend to be studying. But actually for you and I, it's a useful example of you need someone to teach you. Unless you are already enlightened, whatever that means. And at the beginning of this story, he's not fully enlightened. He's ready, but he's not there. Right? And so he learns, he learns these magical practices. Depending on who's telling the story, he'll go to some teacher, and the teacher has a yoga that he teaches him, and a meditation, and he achieves a deep state of concentration in which all thoughts stop. But he's not free yet. He hasn't answered the problem of suffering, of birth, old age, sickness, and death. All thoughts stop. I'm still going to die. That still freaks me out, right? What's life about? Is it about having no thoughts? That does not seem to be the answer. And so he has to recalibrate, and he goes and he thanks his teacher. This is wonderful. It's a great skill to have. I need more. And so he goes and finds another one. And he develops several magical abilities. One example, well, two examples. He could levitate, and he could sit in the middle of a burning fire and remain untouched. Pretty impressive. But that did not set him free from suffering. I'm still going to die. I'm still freaked out. I'm still worried about life. I can fly. Eventually, I won't fly. I'll be dead. I can sit in the fire and be untouched. Eventually, the worms will eat my body. I'll be dead. Thank you very much. These are wonderful abilities to have mastered. My understanding has deepened, and he finds somebody else. Right? So first he's working mentally, then he's working, and this story is told in many different orders, and then he's working with magical abilities. And then he thinks, well, maybe it's the path of privation. Maybe it's the path of really denying myself. And one of our answers was I have to take the rigorous monastic path. There weren't Buddhist monastics yet. He wasn't the Buddha yet. He was still Siddhartha, right? And so it's like, okay, I'm going to punish my body. I am going to master the physical. And so you'll see statues sometimes of the Buddha where he has fasted so long. I believe the discipline is often talked about to eat 1 grain of rice a day. And he did that until he was so skinny that his belly button touched his backbone. He was a skeleton. He looked like a concentration camp survivor. And he's in that state of weakness and sort of almost desperation when he gives up and goes, I've mastered desire, and yet still I'm going to die. I don't understand. I'm not free. I'm still worried, right? And so these are exploratory mistakes or exploratory misunderstandings that lead him along the way as he's journeying from that moment of crisis in which he decides there must be more, and he tries answer A, and that's not it. He goes to the second answer, that's not it. He goes to the third answer, that's not it. It takes 6 years for the Buddha to wind up under the Bodhi tree, in which he finally resolves his questions. And so today's talk is about those 6 years. We'll get to the Bodhi tree maybe next week, right? But this one is just to let yourself appreciate, you started off thinking, so he had great answers, like something's wrong with me was one. And you might go, after a while of training, maybe you've done some therapy, your friends have told you, there's nothing wrong with you. And you go, okay, it's not me, but I'm still not done, right? You're not done the journey yet, right? Well, if I'm okay, there's something going on here, right? And you have to go somewhere else, right? You have to take it deeper, right? Or this is something I just do in private. And I know the person who shared that has done, an extended group retreat. Well, obviously, there was more to it than private. You might think it all has to be done in a group. Try a group retreat. That'll tell you that some of the work needs to be done in private. You need both parts of the scissors to cut. It's not just one, right? And then the scissors are about the cutting, not how beautiful the blades are. Although you can get fixated on that, right? You get fixated on anything. Here's another one, anxiety will stop, was one of the answers. Well, maybe for a while, or maybe you've had a period without anxiety and you're meditating and your anxiety comes back. And think about what we talked about a couple of weeks ago with the samskaras or the formations, like you have these deep karmic habits and patterns, and you've achieved a state of calm that allows an old anxiety to float to the surface. That doesn't mean it's not working. It means it gives you something to work with. And that's a different understanding. So there are all of these understandings that are like journeys deeper and deeper as you explore and experiment, and you're looking for, you had the incident that provoked, there must be something more. And then I believe, it's helpful to have teachers who can help you go, well, that's good, but you're not quite done, who keep pointing you forward on the path, hopefully with kindness and gentleness and some honesty. They're not just telling you what you want to hear, right? It's a mix of good and keep up the effort, right? And then it's like, oh, I'm going to go further. And when you have resolved whatever the enlightenment thing is, and I hope we get to that, right? You'll know it when it happens. And until that moment, you keep looking. So that's part of the message of the life story of the Buddha and what it means to take refuge in the Buddha. As an example, it's like, okay, I was inspired. And now I've followed this experiment, I've done this practice, I've done this other practice, I've worked at this skill, done this in therapy, I've done this in my personal issues, I've healed these relationships, and I'm still going. I'm still going deeper. And it requires adding some intelligence plus stick-to-itiveness and a little bit of luck. And that carries you along the journey. So those are the thoughts that I had to share. I know several of us need to ring off early because we have other commitments. So I'm going to pause the talk here, and I would love to hear what you think. So.